Welcome to Smarking Down's Last Dance video. I'm your host, Brother Bob. With me, as always, for these videos is my buddy JR. How's it going, JR?
Good, man. How are you?
Oh, doing great, man. Last night's episodes, they were the most difficult ones to watch for me personally. What were your
Really?
thoughts?
Um, I'm not gonna lie, man. Some tears were shed.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the we'll start where they started, kind of. Michael Jordan's dad. Um, the coverage of that by the media was pretty incessant. There was a lot of coverage. For me personally, at that age, I was in middle school at the time, and I had not really had a real death in my family, anybody or friends, anybody really close to me at that point. So for me, that was really my first experience with losing somebody, you're familiar with. Obviously celebrities died and stuff, but like there was so much of Jordan's dad and all the Michael Jordan videos and all the Chicago Bulls championship videos. Every time they won the title, he was there. As a middle schooler, I was way more familiar with him than I was with like most like rock musicians or whatever. I've just seen him so much, and there was so much in documentaries. So that was really the first experience I had with somebody passing away and it emotionally affecting me. It was difficult, and the news media had such a heavy focus on it at the time. It was really surprising and difficult to deal with.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, how did you feel about the way the media portrayed things as far as Michael Jordan's gambling? Specifically, him and his father going to Atlantic City, talks about how that may have affected, and led to James Jordan's, murder. How did you feel about how the media portrayed that?
I thought it was terrible. I thought it was in bad taste. It's all speculation, and I don't know, just all those bad coverage articles. I don't even know who those journalists were who did it, but there was a few out there.
And I mean,
And
it wasn't just sports journalists either. Like it was talked about like on like CNN at the time, and
oh,
like
really?
on legitimate news outlets where they were talking about this stuff. And it just shows that um, the mainstream media isn't always your best source. There are definitely times where they sensationalize things for ratings, and I think that was what that was. And it's unfortunate. Any death is tragic, and should be treated properly. Should be treated with soft hands. You shouldn't be using it to sensationalize and just garner ratings. But with Michael Jordan being the biggest athletic star of the time, possibly ever, I see why they did it. They were looking to pop those ratings. It's just unfortunate that that's how things work in these society. But
Yeah.
yeah. So from there, obviously the next step for Michael was retirement, which was equally shocking. I mean, I don't think anybody outside of Michael's inner circle could possibly have said they seen that coming.
No, I remember when I heard the news, they mentioned it in the about that's one of those moments where you're gonna where were you when Michael announced his retirement or when you first heard? And I was actually on my way to class. I was a student at Kendall College of Art and Design. I picked up a friend of mine, and it came on the radio. And as soon as I heard it, I laid on my horn and yelled. I was like, no! And my friend goes, he's like, dude, calm down, man. Like, I was pissed. I was just like, no, this isn't true.
Yeah,
Where were you, man, when you heard?
I believe I was home. I think we were still off from school at the time. I think yeah, I think we were still off school at the time. I remember watching it on TV at home. So I don't know if it was like the like live or if it was like later on like on Sports Center or something, but I remember watching it and just being completely disheartened and really really sad. Not necessarily upset or but just really really sad. Michael saying specifically that he lost the love of the game. That line, really I really remember how sad that made me to hear somebody who always talked about how much he loved the game. And all those VHS releases and stuff, he was like, "Oh, I love the game. You gotta do it for the love of the game. If you don't love the game, why are you playing?" Things of that nature. And then here's the guy at the top of his game, saying that he's lost interest in playing. And I remember that really upset me at the time. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I was
I mean,
shocked, and like my first reaction was I was like pissed. But of course, yes, I was very sad. It was just a really sad moment. I remember my sister calling my mom asking, "Is JR crying?" and stuff like that. And but yeah,
yeah, it was definitely a shocking moment. And I mean it really took a team. I mean, a lot of people still say that, oh, the Bulls, they would have lost that year anyway. They couldn't have played against the Rockets and Akeem, blah blah blah. Um, I think that Bulls team would have got past the Knicks, and I think they would have had a 6 or 7 game series against Houston. I think they would have eventually won. Um, the Bulls were seriously lacking the guy to push them. The new players they added, and they were lacking that team leadership. And we'll talk more about Scottie here in a few minutes because that's a big part
okay.
of that. But I think that team, I think you still had a team that could win a championship. Um, the following season not so much, but that year I think you had a team that could have been a championship contender with Horace still there. The addition of Tony Kukoc. If Michael would have still been there, I think you had a team that could have possibly made it to the finals. But we'll never know because Michael decided to go play baseball, which I don't know. I felt like there was maybe a little bit too much time focused on the baseball aspect in this series. What do you think?
A little bit for me, especially because I own that DVD, the 30 for 30. What's it called again? Yes.
Yes, and I highly recommend anybody who really enjoyed the baseball aspect of the Michael Jordan Last Dance, or who just wants to know more, check this out. It's Jordan Rides the Bus as part of ESPN's 31st 30 series, and it highlights that time with him in the minors and really goes into depth. In fact, they actually use some footage that was in that 30 for 30 in the Last Dance here. So if you want to find out more about that, I highly recommend checking it out. It is available, as you've seen, on DVD, and I'm sure it's probably on ESPN Plus or something for streaming as well. But it's definitely one to check out. I just feel like because they did a full 30 for 30 already on that subject, they kind of could have skimmed over a little bit more than what they did in The Last Dance.
Yes.
Yeah. And before going in, like I read the synopsis for this episode, and I actually called you and was like, so how are they going to do this? Because the synopsis is saying they're talking about all these things, but it doesn't even mention like the Sonics or the 72 win season in the synopsis. And I'm like, are they skipping this and leaving all of that for that last episode? Because the last 2 episodes, because that's a lot to cover. Thankfully, that's not the case. They did get around to the fourth championship season, but I think if they had left the baseball portion out, they could have covered that a little more in depth.
Yeah, I could have had half the time spent on it, and I've been good.
Yep. But they did cover Scottie. And what was that, 1.8 seconds?
1.8 seconds of shame.
Yep. Tony comes to the team, and you have to kind of relate to where Scottie Pippen was coming from. As we've seen in previous episodes, and we talked about, they had been courting Tony Kukoc. They've been talking about, how he was going to be the future of the franchise. Meanwhile, they're underpaying Scottie Pippen. They want to keep money under the cap so they can bring Tony Kukoc in. Michael and Scottie go there and torch him with the Dream Team. And still, Jerry Krause is all about, bringing in Tony Kukoc. So then they do so, and then here you are in the playoffs, that key moment, and they want Scottie taking the ball out of bounds. I can see where he'd be upset. I think there is something to be said about that play in general that I can critique it. But first, what were your thoughts as far as, how this all, came about?
I mean, I can understand from Scottie's point of view all of being frustrated at that moment, the heat of the moment, but ultimately it was one of the worst, if not the worst, decision of his life.
Yeah, the sitting out was a terrible decision.
He basically quit on the team.
Yeah,
and then I think that shows right there. I mean, a true leader. How Michael's a true leader. Michael wouldn't. I don't think Michael's all about winning, and if that would have meant they were going to win, I think he would have been for it. I mean, I don't know. Some people disagree with me, but I mean, this is the guy that passed off to Bill Wennington for the dunk and to Steve Kerr that one year and all that. So
I think the difference here is, and this is where I'm going to critique the play. I don't think Scottie should have been taking the ball out. And that's what the play called for, was Scottie Pippen taking the ball out and inbounding.
Yeah.
I think they could have used Scottie much like they did Jordan in those other sequences you mentioned. They could have allowed Scottie to be out there to distract the other team.
Yep.
And that would have gave Tony a clear shot, because if you watch the replay of that, Tony did not have a clear shot. The fact that he made that, he had a hand on his face, that was really, really clutch. Unlike, John Paxson, Steve Kerr, Bill Wennington, those other plays, all those guys had clear shots. Tony Kukoc had a hand directly in his face because of the fact that, Scottie wasn't out there. There was nobody else. Tony was the obvious guy at that point, if you look at who was on the floor. And I think with Scottie on the floor as a distraction to draw, the opponent's eye, I think that would have helped Tony get a more clear shot. So I can see him being upset with the, being the guy inbounding the ball portion, but you can't quit on your team. You can't just not go in.
Right.
And I can also see the reason why Phil wanted him inbounding the ball. Scottie, one of the best passers on the team, if not the best passer on the team.
Oh, he was everything that year.
Yep.
He led in all categories, I think.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I just, it's a unfortunate situation, and I think it plagued them the rest of the series. I think they never really recovered from that, because New York.
I think he could have been, like he was saying, he said he wanted to be a threat. But even if he wasn't the guy inbounding the ball,
Mm-hmm.
and the plays were drawn up for Tony, he still would have been pissed.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. He still would have been upset. But I mean, it's one of those what if scenarios where we really don't know. I mean, he did say if it was to happen all over again, he'd probably do the same thing. So I mean, yeah.
I mean,
I don't know.
I think I would have. I wouldn't have. I would have changed it.
Yeah.
I would have played. I would have inbound the damn ball.
Yep. I mean,
I don't know. I think I thought about it at first. Did he really just say that? He was just crying, apologizing to his teammates. But then, I really thought about it. I'm like, well, he obviously learned from this situation. He, I guess, grew from that and realized his mistake. But so that's why usually you hear that all the time. Like, I wouldn't change a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I mean, I guess it all depends on how you take the idea of, like, I do it all over because I wouldn't change anything, or I do it all over because I thought it was right. I mean, the way he said it made it sound like he would do it all over just because that's what he would do. But I think he probably meant, after seeing everything before that, that he wouldn't change anything about his career because he grew from it or whatever.
Yeah.
It just didn't really come across that way when he said it.
One thing they skimmed past the Hugh Hollins Phantom Call, where they could have ultimately won that series.
Okay, well, explain this to everybody since they skimmed past it and people didn't see it. Explain the Phantom Call.
It was a with Scottie, um, who was it, Greg Anthony or Hubert Davis? I think it was Greg Anthony. I'm not sure who it was, but someone ended up shooting free throws, and you can see on the replay there was no foul, and they ended up winning because of those free throws. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We could have been. That's because of that mistake, and even Hugh Hollins admitted to it later. Game 6, that would have been the clincher, and I was at that game. I was at that. It was actually the last professional NBA game played at the old Chicago Stadium. That Game 6.
Yep.
And that was the play where Scottie dunked on Ewing and walked over top of him.
Yeah.
And that would have been so awesome to be at that game to clinch the series against, but I don't know. Yeah. But that game, I've never heard the Chicago Stadium that as loud as that after that dunk.
Yeah, and the United Center has never been as loud as the Chicago Stadium. So, yeah, it's one of the that was a classic arena, man. That
we've talked about this before, but I brought a sign to that game, and I don't know if you saw it or not, but I've had a couple of people say that they saw me on TV because I brought a sign. I was in the 300 level, looking down at the basket.
Okay.
On that where he dunked on Ewing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a sign I was holding up that said "Pippen ain't easy." Pippen in red, then "ain't easy" stacked. It was like 3 lines, and "ain't easy" was in black. And I'm always looking on YouTube trying to find if I could find it, pause or something like that. But someone said they saw me on the news. But
NBA needs to release that game, man. Put that on DVD.
That'd be awesome if I could see that. But I don't know if anyone's watching this and they have it and they could screenshot it. Cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we have a bunch of stuff from we've been at wrestling events where we got screenshots of us on TV. So yeah, that would be cool to have that you and your sign, especially if Scottie's in frame with it too. Like if that's like a shot from the floor or something when he's dunking or shooting or something, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure what angle it was or what, but I was way up in the 300 level, so it was nosebleeds, but I don't know.
Yeah. So then they start talking about the following season, the season where the Bulls lose like a large part of their roster. A lot of new players come in. I mean, the addition of Ron Harper, BJ's gone. Horace is gone. Steve Kerr is taking BJ's minutes. I mean, they have Wennington and who else? Or Cartwright was gone. Wennington's there. Luke Longley's there. I mean, you see a lot of these guys from that second championship show up the following season. Michael's still playing baseball at that point. And it was a struggling season for Chicago. They were like a 500 team.
Yeah.
I mean, it interests me, and it's something I have always thought was odd, is that they had Ron Harper on the team and they started Pete Myers. I will never understand the reasoning for starting Pete Myers over someone like Ron Harper. I mean, Ron Harper was like a superstar in the Clippers, with the Clippers in LA, and he was a top tier player in Cleveland. What's that?
How old was he though?
I don't know, 30s. I mean, early 30s probably.
I don't know.
I mean, he played he won a championship with the Lakers, in the 2000s. He was a starter on the Lakers team for a minute. I mean, I don't understand why he was not the guy replacing Jordan in that role, being that he could score. Pete Myers Pete Myers was famous for being the guy who missed the free throws that cost the fans pizza. Every nickname was Pizza Pete. I mean, he's not the guy you would think they would have starting. It was an odd choice, I thought, on Phil Jackson's part. But I
Yeah,
think I feel like the team improved with the additions. I mean, the loss of Horace was a big loss. It hurt the team, but I think the additions of Luke Longley, the addition of Steve Kerr, Ron Harper, I feel like those guys were better than the guys they had lost from the championship teams, with the exception of Horace. I think Luke Longley was more mobile than what Bill Cartwright was. He was younger. I think Ron Harper was a better scorer, and could with a better defender than John Paxson was. Not as good of a 3-point shooter, obviously, but then Steve Kerr was just as good of a 3-point shooter as BJ or Pax. So I feel like the additions they made were strong. I just don't think the guys who they added had that championship pedigree yet. They didn't have that experience that the other guys did, and I think that's probably why they were in that 500 category that season before Michael came back.
yeah. I think a lot of teams probably took out frustrations on them now that Michael was gone too.
Yep. And I mean, without the low post play of guys like Cartwright and Horace Grant, I mean, they could pound the ball inside and just I mean, Tony wasn't a good defender at all at that point, and they didn't have a legitimate defensive stopper down there, so they could just pound the ball in and take advantage of them. So, that also had to hurt the team. But I have a question for you, Jr. So, what was your reaction when Scottie Pippen was rocking those Jordans and brought him up to the
And
camera?
that was one of my favorite moments with all because that was all the speculation, the hype of the possible him coming back.
Yep. Oh,
And when I saw that on the news, and he lifted up that uh, Chicago colorway of the Air Jordan 10
mm-hmm.
to it and did the little come here, whatever. That was, I loved it.
Oh, me
I'd
too.
wear a T-shirt of that photo of him doing that. like,
Absolutely, man. I that moment was, oh man, I was jumping up and down. I remember watching that game and seeing Scotty do that, and I'm like, oh my god. I believe that one was one that was on like what WGN at the time, and I was just like, that is so amazing. And then it ran on like every sports channel, every news channel, like that freaking like next like 3 days. They just kept running that clip, and no, that was so cool. Um, yeah. So
that's a classic moment for sure.
yeah. So do you think with so Michael Jordan, the reason he left baseball was due to the strike. They talked about the fact that they thought if the strike wouldn't have happened, the baseball strike wouldn't have happened, Jordan probably would have continued playing. Do you think that he ever would have made it to the majors, or do you think that he was kind of going to be relegated to that Double A ball?
I think he had a lot of work to do yet. I don't think he would go. Eventually, he might, but
Mm-hmm.
I think he still had a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, obviously, I'm not a baseball expert. I know very little about baseball. The experts they had on there really thought he had improved tremendously. And that shows what a good athlete he is. But I think he was in a situation where he was going to have to be amazing to get the credit he deserved. And we've seen that in recent years with other sports, specifically CM Punk, professional wrestler, also a Chicago guy. Wrestled in WWE for years, leaves the company, decides he wants to do MMA. Does the right thing. Takes jiu-jitsu training. joined the gym, you know, does what he needs to do. But you know, he signed a deal with the UFC, the top MMA company in the world, and they put him on like pay per view, and he lost. You know, his record's 0-2, and he got a lot of flack for that. People saying he shouldn't be there. People, you know, and you have other professional wrestlers who did similar but didn't go into the UFC. They went to Bellator, and because the competition wasn't as talented, you know, they've been able to have better careers. I think Jordan within that same kind of situation. You know, they everybody said, okay, he's the greatest athlete in the world. He's the greatest basketball player in the world, and he's not doing good, and he's in the minors. You know, it's an embarrassment, and they were going to call it that regardless. You know, if he wasn't like immediately in the majors playing baseball with like the best players at the time, they were going to say that because everybody really wanted him to be playing basketball instead.
Yeah, we'll never know. I mean, that's the one thing with Michael though is when his mind is set on something. I mean that there's no stopping. It's like I think eventually he probably could have got to the major leagues, but I don't know at at what rate, like how fast that would have happened. But
Yeah. But thankfully for everybody, you know, baseball strike happened, and Michael Jordan shows up at the practice facility playing 1-on-1 with BJ, and you know, getting in scrimmages with guys, and comes back and you know scores has a very underwhelming game against Indiana. I remember watching that game, and even then I was you know like, oh man, like he's not playing to the skill level that I'm used to seeing. You know, and then he goes and hits a game winner against Atlanta, and then completely obliterates the New York Knicks.
yeah,
um, and yeah, Patrick Ewing. I just watched that game earlier this week, and Patrick Ewing says on the Last Dance, he's like, you know, it's unfortunate because I'm pretty sure I had a pretty good game that game too. Yeah, Patrick Ewing dropped like 39 points, had double digit rebounds. Patrick like went off in the fourth quarter. Yeah, no, like Patrick was scoring from everywhere. Patrick was hitting jump shots. He was taking people off the dribble. He was posting up and hitting post up moves. He was getting offensive boards and putbacks. Like Ewing was scoring from everywhere possible. And just Michael Jordan's play was just incredible. Those 55 points, he came out, started off hot, did a lot of early game scoring, and then had a cold third quarter, but man came back and did some scoring in the fourth to clinch it for him. You know, Spike Lee, this famous Spike Lee commercial. Michael dropped a double nickel. You know,
yep.
yep.
And his
Have
he wore those classic Air Jordan ones in that game, and he said his feet were bleeding.
the Air Jordan ones wasn't that game, dude. That was his final game in New York.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
The,
talking about the Knicks game though, at the Garden.
the 55-point one, he was wearing 45.
Oh,
The
that's right.
Yeah, the game he wore
Yeah.
those shoes was his last game ever in New York, which
Okay.
wasn't a 55-point game. Yes, but yeah, no, he you know, everybody made such a big deal about John Starks guarding him, and you know the Knicks having taken the Bulls out of the playoffs the year before, and yeah, no, Michael just lit them up, and it kind of shows like, you know, and he's definitely not in full basketball shape at that point, and still, you know, he was enough of a factor. The Bulls got that win, and it kind of proves that point where had he been there during that playoff series, the Bulls probably would have beat the Knicks.
Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, yeah, some good moments, but we got to talk about Orlando, man. So Horace Grant takes off from Chicago. They don't want to re-sign him. They don't want to pay him the money he thinks he deserves. So he takes a big payday from Orlando and goes and joins Shaq and Penny. And yeah, no, like the addition of Horace Grant to that team really, really helped that team. I think it helped them not just from having a defensive minded, you know, four, but also the championship pedigree he had, he was able to bring and kind of teach these guys almost as a player coach type situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a good squad. The Shaq and Penny combo.
Yep.
What did they call it, or what did Shaq call? They said the Kareem and Magic of the '90s.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, they had Horace, they had Nick Anderson, Dennis Scott, a lot of couple really good 3-point shooters on that team. So Shaq gets doubled, they can kick it out and knock down those threes. It was a really well built team. The fact that they got swept by the Rockets is crazy, but um, the Bulls, they did manage to upset the Bulls. Which I mean, I guess at the time, nobody would have thought was an upset. I mean, it is Jordan's Bulls though, and that 45 ended up being a bad luck number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nick Anderson with the steal on Jordan. Game one, closing minutes, and I mean the Bulls really. I don't know if they recovered from that. I don't think Michael recovered from that. I think because the very next play he turned the ball over. Seen Pippen going for a cut. Jordan passes, turns the ball over because he passes behind Pippen.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that'd be a situation where Jordan would have shot that.
Yep.
So I think it mentally fatigued him, and he's already not in full basketball shape. I think he kind of left them in a situation where they were really fighting a uphill battle. Not to mention the fact that they just could keep pounding it into Shaq and keep dunking over everybody. They didn't have Bill Cartwright at that point. They had Will Perdue and Luke Longley and Bill Wennington they had to rely on. None of who were going to get calls, going their way against Shaq. Yeah.
The three-headed monster.
Yep. So, yeah, Chicago loses. They're out of the playoffs, and MJ's got a movie to shoot.
Yeah.
Now, these stories are some of my favorite, and I at the time wanted nothing more than to just like fly out to LA and just sit in that friggin' dome on Warner Brothers lot and watch them play basketball. Warner Brothers Studios, when shooting Space Jam, built Michael Jordan a basketball court, put a dome around it on the lot, and Michael had anybody and everybody come out and play basketball with him. And God, to watch those games would have been amazing. Patrick Ewing, Reggie Miller, Shaquille O'Neal came out at one point, Penny Hardaway, like all the top players in the NBA came out and played basketball with Michael Jordan. A lot of your top college players came out and played basketball with Michael Jordan. Like to sit and be able to watch those games must have been amazing. Anybody who was privy to do so must have just fantastic memories of that time.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure those games were super physical because it was call your own foul.
Yep.
And when you're playing like that, no ticky tack calls are allowed.
Yeah.
It's like one of those blood needs to be drawn type of things. People are probably getting hacked, but still like shooting it and trying to get the bucket. But yeah, I'd love to watch some of those games.
Yeah, I mean, imagine going to work, working all day with like Bill Murray, and then after working, being able to go play basketball with like Patrick Ewing and Reggie Miller. It's crazy. It's
Who else was there's Juwan Howard was out there.
I think
Dennis.
Yep, Dennis Rodman was out there. Yep. Well, I mean, L.A. is. I mean, these guys, during this off season, where are they going to go? I mean, some of them travel Europe or whatever, but like LA is such a big city as far as partying and Hollywood and them being able to do like off season, TV appearances and stuff. It's going to draw a lot of your NBA talent out there. And so having a court out there to play on, I mean, those guys, it's just another reason for them to be in LA. You go to LA, you play with Michael for a little bit, and then you go out and go to the club, you go party. You go hobnob with all the other celebrities, and the Lakers are out there, so anybody who was a free agent at that time who was can set up meetings to meet with the Lakers and then go play ball with Jordan. It's a win-win situation for anybody in the league at the time.
Yeah.
But but that's how Michael got back in shape for the next season. And he was looking. The next season was like, I want to win a championship. Like, that was the concern,
Oh,
and that is why he managed to get in a fight with Steve Kerr.
the littlest guy on the team.
Yep.
I'm
Man,
glad he mentioned that too. I'm like, of all the people, it's like,
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
there's others. I know he got into it with Will Purdue.
the thing is,
So
Will
he's one of
Purdue,
the biggest guys on the team, like height wise.
yeah,
But
but Will Purdue's a big guy, so it's like you kind of expect him to, like, be able to take it. And Steve Kerr, like, him's just standing up to Michael and, like, hitting him and throwing the first punch too. He threw a punch and hit him in the chest, and I'm like, that's awesome. I didn't know Steve Kerr threw the first punch. I always heard that Jordan punched Steve Kerr, but I never heard Steve Kerr lost it and threw the first punch. I'm like, that's super funny that the smallest guy in the team, throws a punch at, like, your superstar.
why would you go for the chest?
Well, I mean, how tall is Steve? Five what? Michael's 6'6". Something to be said about, like, the height difference there too. Uh, but yeah, no, like, I love the fact that Steve Kerr, stood up for himself, and that I think that's why Michael had the respect he had for Kerr later on. I think they seemed to have a camaraderie, and he talked about that with Scott Burrell and Scottie Pippen too. Like, those guys, he pushed them, and they didn't give up. They didn't lose their cool or pout about it. They played, and they tried to be successful, and I think Jordan really respects that out of his teammates. And I mean, that's a good thing. I think any situation where you know a player reacts to being pushed or being encouraged in a positive way is a good thing. I know.
Yeah, some people need that fire under their
Mm,
ass.
yeah, I know when I played in high school, the best situations were with them where I was being pushed to play better. I had quite a few coaches who were of the mindset of, well, you're not the best player and you're never going to be the best player, and kind of just left it at that and didn't want to push you to be better. It was those coaches who pushed you and said, you can do better than that, and this is what I need out of every player on this team, and I need everybody to be at this level, and pushed everybody equally. That tended to get the most out of me, the player, and the teams need to do better with those kind of coaches as well. So, and having Michael do that is good. I mean, Phil was more of the Zen coach, right? I mean, you had to have somebody pushing those guys to the extent Michael was.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So we do get some conversation about the they go in the playoffs and they sweep the Magic, so that's vindication right there from the year before.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And then they go on and they have the finals. They have the Seattle SuperSonics. One thing I was kind of sad about, like, where was the interview with Frank Burkowski? That was a big part of that series, and they didn't even talk about it. And I'm like, man, why are we not talking about the Rodman stopper?
I think that should have been saved for the Rodman segment. I don't know.
or
Maybe it's
I
still
mean,
coming. I don't know.
I don't know. They did the Rodman segment earlier when they talked the Pistons and then them
I don't know.
signing
They're
Rodman,
hopping
and
back and forth so much.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
For someone like, because we've seen it all,
mhm.
but for someone who doesn't know anything, they're watching this, they're probably a little confused
Yeah,
because when
jo-
it keeps changing.
Jordan has been confused watching, and I've had to been like, all right, so this is, you got to remember that this is they're showing apart from the final season, and then they're going to go back to like older stuff. So,
Yeah.
so we've been going through, as it progresses, we've been watching games from the DVD box sets. So we've been going like the first championship, second championship. We've been watching games to kind of keep him and understand where the timeline is, because it has been a little confusing for him. But I just feel like Frank Brickowski should have been mentioned. Like, that was such a big deal that they thought he was the Rodman stopper, and the fact that Rodman was such a big part of this team, that a team felt they needed a Rodman stopper, and they needed someone to go out there and stop Dennis from getting boards and keep Dennis from making those passes to the other guys, because that triangle offense ran through your small forward, power forward, and a point guard on one side, and your point guard, shooting guard, center on the other. And so a lot of times Rodman with the guy, making passes out of that triangle to Scottie or Michael. So he was an intricate part of that triangle. And it's really interesting that they felt the need to have a guy come out there and kind of put the brakes on Dennis. And then Dennis just destroyed him. Like, Dennis completely, utterly humiliated Frank Brickowski.
My favorite Dennis moment was during some free throws.
When he just stood there smiling at him?
Smiling at, and just, he wasn't even like in that position for the rebound. He was just like facing Frank Brickowski, just staring at him.
Well, so Bill Walton hated Dennis Rodman. Like, Bill Walton hated Dennis Rodman.
Oh my God, you could totally tell every comment he made.
During those free throws, he's like, how is he not getting a technical foul for that? Because Dennis was staring at the guy. And yeah, it was terrible.
Terrible antics by Rodman.
Yes.
Just like, shut up, Bill.
Yep.
Shut up. He was so anti-Chicago in his commentating, and like, just, I can't stand Bill Walton as a commentator.
Yeah, that's something in that playoff series that really stands out, is Bill Walton he loathed Dennis Rodman. Anytime Rodman got called for foul, he's like, he should be ejected. Like, it was over the top. And but yeah, no, during those free throws, Rodman just standing there, hands behind his back, standing up straight, just staring at him. Yeah. And Walton's like, how is that not considered a foul? How are the referees not putting an end to this? That's taunting. And I'm like, what the hell?
I love Dennis, man.
He's so good. And like, Frank Brickowski gets thrown out of the game like multiple times. He got kicked out of the game multiple times where Dennis is still in there because he just wouldn't shut up. I mean, that's like Frank Brickowski's legacy, is like that Dennis Rodman got under his skin. Like, that's the legacy this guy has as a player. Yeah.
You need to post a pic of a still of Dennis doing that. The stare down with this Frank Brickowski.
Yeah, I'll put it in post. But so that team, we talked about the fact that I thought that maybe Phoenix was the best team they ever played. I think the Sonics were probably the most athletic team they ever played.
Kemp was no joke, man.
Yeah. I mean, Gary Payton was defensive player of the year and like steals leader. Sean Kemp, multi-time All-Star, just dominant, four. They had guys like Deflas Shrimp, who is, European player, one of the top European players at the time. He came out, shot really well against the Dream Team when they played. They had Nate McMillan, who, with a veteran, he was kind of like the captain of the team, the leader of the team. I mean, they had a solid squad. But then, of course, George Karl.
Remember Steve Scheffler?
Oh, God, yeah. I vaguely remember Steve Scheffler.
The only reason I know him is because he walked into my work one day when I was bagging groceries in St. Joe. Yeah. We're like, you know who that is? Like, yeah, he sucks. But anyway.
So George Karl had to go make that mistake of like snubbing Jordan when they're out to dinner.
Oh, man. Anything to fuel the fire, man.
Yup. And you know,
Because what if he did say hi and like all buddy buddy with him and
yeah.
I don't
Then
know.
Jordan be like, "Oh, he's not taking it seriously. I'm gonna light him up."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yep. I don't know. It's funny. Jordan just finds things to fuel him. I still think. I mean, the series went 6 games. The Bulls went up 3-0, lost 2 in a row. Gary Payton seems to think that's all because of him, which obviously Michael didn't agree.
No, he was laughing.
I think a lot of it had to do with their 1 win away from a championship, and Jordan is preoccupied thinking about his dad. They lost 2, and then he used the motivation of playing on Father's Day, and they pick up that Game 6 win. I mean, I remember at the time, a lot of people saying when they lost the first one, I heard people, rumblings from people saying, "Oh, well, they're going to lose the next one because Michael wants to win on Father's Day for his dad." I don't think it's necessarily that simple. I don't think Michael was like, "All right, guys, we got to lose these next 2 games so I can win on Father's Day."
That's too much of a risk. I
Yeah,
don't think.
he's too much of a competitor for that.
Yeah.
But what I do think is that he was probably thinking about his dad. It's close to Father's Day, and on Father's Day he used it as motivation, and that's why they picked up that final win on the Game 6, and that's why Game 4 and 5 were losses and were more difficult for him. That's at least my theory. I mean, they didn't. Jordan said he had other things on his mind here in the Last Dance documentary, so that kind of leads into what I was saying. Kind of makes it feel more legitimate, my theory, but he didn't outright say that was the reason. I mean, and plus, I mean, a lot of people, they're the talk of the 72-10 and like, oh, we're expected to sweep them, blah blah blah. Now in hindsight, we've seen a team go 73-9, and they ended their playoffs being swept in the finals. So the fact that like the expectation was for them to sweep whoever within the finals, is probably was a bit much at the time. I think it was a higher expectation than it should have been. And looking at this Warriors team that beat their regular season record, they didn't win a championship, and that's the key thing. It was always 72-10 doesn't mean a thing without a ring. It was on the merch, it was on the hats, and they did win the championship. So I think that's why that team is still the greatest team of all time.
Me too. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So I really think Gary Payton's a great defender. However, I don't think he made as much of a difference as he thought he did. I mean, Jordan's always had a bit of an issue playing with the smaller point guards, especially the defensive-minded quick ones. But I don't think he made as big of a difference in those 2 games as he likes to think he did.
Yeah. I mean, it's all for Gary Payton's pride. I think he's still talking shit, talking smack.
Yeah. Well, Gary never won a championship, did he? Did he?
No. Well,
did he win with the Heat?
Didn't he ride on the coattails of? Yeah, it was like the Heat, I think.
Was it the Heat? Okay, because he didn't win with the Lakers, because him and Malone went to the Lakers, and that didn't work out.
No, I want to say it was
so.
The Heat.
Yeah, he may have run the coattails of a Heat, but yeah, no. Sonics never made it back to the finals, so that was their one run, and now they don't exist as a team anymore. So yeah.
It's a shame. They should bring back the Sonics.
Absolutely. Something there's talk of them having an expansion teams coming like in the next couple years, and hopefully one will be Seattle. I think Seattle deserves a team. The fact that they drafted three MVPs and 3 drafts in a row, and they never got to see anything come of that is sad. you know,
Yeah.
yeah. But next week we got the last 2 episodes. We got, I'm assuming, a whole lot of Utah Jazz in there because we got 2 championships to discuss. I'm not sure what else they're going to touch on though. I mean, the stuff I expected them to touch on so far, a lot of it they haven't. But at the same time, I don't know how it's going to fit into this episode. It'll be interesting to see what they include. I mean, obviously we're going to get the Pacers. We're going to get to see some more of Reggie and the Pacers. And that'll be good because that series was crazy, especially when Reggie freaking pushed off on Jordan and hit that 3. Yeah.
Hey, we can't say anything about push-offs, though. Michael's last shot was a push-off.
Yeah, but it was on freaking Byron Russell.
The shove. I mean, the shot.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still bitter about it all these years later. But, yeah.
It was an awesome shove.
Yep.
The ref didn't see it.
The thing is, he shoved him in the back. If you're already past him to where he can shove you in the back, it was like in the hip area.
Yeah, he kind of pushed him on the hip area, and then you could see he loses his footing because of it, all that momentum. And it looks like he broke his ankles, but he shoved him, and then there's the pose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not even the first time Jordan's hit that shot from that spot against that team. He did it with the flu game. He hit the same similar shot.
I thought that was a little farther out. Was it the same spot? I'm not sure.
It was top of the key free throw line area in that circle, I think. But
that fist pump.
Yeah. But yeah, they'll have to talk about the flu game next week too. That'll be something I'm sure they'll cover, and that's a classic moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Scottie holding him up.
Yep. It says a lot, but I think
it was nuts because I remember seeing the footage of him. He's just like turning away Gatorade. It's like, no, I don't want to. Like, I guess because he couldn't keep anything down. He didn't want to just puke it up.
Yep. Yeah. I guess he threw up at halftime, and I mean, it was a rough state. And
there's conspiracy theories about that too. Like they're thinking he got some bad pizza, and people knew that it was Jordan's hotel room, and they like did something to the pizza to make him sick.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're regretting it. Gee, if that's how he played sick, I think how good he would have played if he wasn't sick.
Yeah.
He would have won 2 games with that shot. Oh, man. Yeah, well, I think that pretty much covers the stuff from this week. Do you have anything else you want to add? I mean...
I thought it was funny. He said how he was suspended in high school 3 times.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yep.
I'm like, what in the world did he do?
Well, we know he got into fights all the time with his brother over basketball and like losing games and stuff. So I'm assuming he probably got in fights with like kids playing one-on-one, like in gym class or something, or like.
Okay. That's a good theory.
Yeah, or like the kids were, doing some kind of sport-oriented thing, and he won, the other kid got mad, so then him and the other kid got in a fight, or the other kid won, he got mad, so they got in a fight. Like, I think that's probably because he said that his dad said, if this kind of stuff keeps happening, next time it happens, you're not going to be able to do sports anymore. Like, that was the thing. Like, he would be grounded for sports.
You think one of them was for, like, gambling during recess or something?
Yeah, totally. Playing dominoes during recess.
Yeah. They're like betting their lunch money.
Yeah, Jordan in elementary school playing jacks.
Yeah.
I can jump rope more times than you can jump rope.
Yeah.
I'll put 10 down on hopscotch.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's primarily
high school. But
yeah, I think it's primarily the competition stuff. Just because we heard so much about it from, even him and his brother used to get in fights, so it seems like that would make sense. And then hearing, obviously when hearing in this episode, him and Will Purdue and him and Steve Kerr, I'm like, it sounds like that's kind of a pattern. Jordan's super competitive, and he said in other episodes, he's like, I don't have a gambling problem, I have a competition problem. I'm addicted to competition. And
compulsive competitor.
yep, which, I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense as far as being suspended for athletics. Um, I know in high school there were numerous times where, like, teammates would get in fights, or people in PE class would get into fights over, like, whatever sport they were playing at the time. So yeah, I even know.
We've all had our shares of mix-ups like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I've had a few times where somebody freaking, I called a foul and they didn't agree, and it turned into them trying to, like, punch me in the face, and just ridiculous shit like that, just on the, like, basketball court. So, outside of school, like, as adults, I've had, at 22 years old, I had people like, that wasn't a foul, and coming at you like they're gonna try to beat you up. So it's like, all right, the competition thing is probably where that came from for Michael as well. But yeah. Anyway, I think that covered everything. Next week we'll be doing another one of these. Everybody hopefully enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, and tomahawk dunk that bell button, because we like that here. Helps us out a bunch. Terrible.
Terrible call. I'm hitting the subscribe button.
Yeah.
My Bill Walton for that.
Be sure to Frank Burkowski the bell button.
Oh,
yeah, you guys punch that bell button square in the chest like you're Steve Kerr.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's getting worse.
All right. Yes, it's getting worse. I can do this all day. All right. From Brother Bob, JR. Hey, see y'all next week.
Peace.